My name is Emmanuel Blackwood, and I died on October 17th, 2008. For 20 minutes and 45 seconds, my heart stopped beating, my lungs ceased to draw breath, and my soul departed from my body. During those moments, which felt like an eternity, I experienced something so profound and terrifying that it has completely transformed my life and ministry. I was shown the reality of hell, the majesty of heaven, and given a message that I've been commanded to share with the world. This is my testimony. It was just past midnight when I felt the first signs that something was wrong. I had been working tirelessly for weeks, preparing for a major community outreach event that our church was organizing. The pressure had been immense. Fundraising challenges, volunteer shortages, and a series of unexpected obstacles had left me physically and spiritually drained. That particular night, I had stayed late at the church office, reviewing budgets and finalizing details. Just a few more hours, I told myself, rubbing my eyes as the numbers on the spreadsheet began to blur. I can sleep tomorrow. The pain started subtly, a tightness in my chest that I dismissed as indigestion. I'd been surviving on coffee and fast food for days, so it seemed like a reasonable explanation. I reached for the bottle of antacids I kept in my desk drawer and swallowed 2 tablets without water, grimacing at the chalky taste. As I leaned back in my chair, trying to find relief, the pressure in my chest intensified. It was as if someone was slowly tightening a belt around my torso. Sweat beaded on my forehead, despite the cool air from the office's air conditioning system. Something wasn't right. I reached for my phone, thinking I should call someone, but I couldn't remember who. My thoughts were becoming jumbled, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. The office tilted sideways as I tried to stand. "Lord, help me," I whispered, gripping the edge of my desk. The pain suddenly exploded, radiating from my chest down my left arm. It was excruciating, like nothing I had ever experienced before. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the office floor, knocking over a stack of papers that fluttered down around me like large white snowflakes. I knew I was having a heart attack. At 42 years old, I had always considered myself relatively healthy. Yes, I carried extra weight, and yes, my doctor had warned me about my blood pressure at my last checkup. But I had convinced myself that I was too busy serving God to worry about such earthly concerns. As I lay on the floor, gasping for breath, I thought about my wife, Natalie, and our 3 children asleep at home, unaware that their husband and father was dying alone on an office floor. Regret washed over me. Regret for the time I hadn't spent with them, for the school plays and soccer games I had missed because I was doing the Lord's work. In that moment, I realized how badly I had confused my priorities. The pain was now unbearable, crushing my chest with relentless pressure. My vision began to darken around the edges, the ceiling lights above me becoming dim and distant. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. My mouth moved silently as consciousness began to slip away. The last thing I remember thinking was, "I'm not ready to die." But death doesn't ask if you're ready. What happened next defies explanation by conventional science, yet it was more real than anything I've ever experienced. I felt a strange sensation, like being pulled upward by an invisible force. The pain that had been so overwhelming just moments before suddenly vanished. It was as if I had been submerged underwater and had finally broken through to the surface, taking a deep, satisfying breath of pure, clean air. I found myself hovering near the ceiling of my office, looking down at my own body sprawled awkwardly on the floor. My first thought was surprisingly practical. Someone's going to find a mess in the morning. I could see my phone just inches from my outstretched hand, the screen still illuminated, showing the half-dialed 911 that I hadn't completed. What struck me most was how peaceful I felt. There was no fear, no pain, no anxiety, just a profound sense of detachment and curiosity. I examined my body with clinical interest, noting the ashen color of my face and the way my eyes stared blankly at nothing. Was this really me? This empty shell that looked like an abandoned suit of clothes? I wondered if I was dreaming, but everything was too vivid, too detailed for a dream. I could see dust particles floating in the beam of my desk lamp. I could read the titles of books on my bookshelf from across the room. My senses seemed heightened, operating at a level of perception I had never known while alive. I'm dead, I realized, but the thought didn't frighten me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of wonder. I tried to move and discovered that merely thinking about it was enough. I drifted through my office door, literally through it, experiencing only the slightest resistance, like passing through a sheet of water. The hallway was dark, but I could see perfectly. The colors were different somehow, deeper, more vibrant, as if I was seeing things in their true form for the first time. I moved through the church building, passing through the sanctuary where just hours earlier I had been rehearsing Sunday's sermon. The empty pews seemed to hold the echoes of countless prayers and hymns. How many sermons had I delivered from that pulpit? How many of them had been truly inspired by God? And how many had been mere performances, designed to impress rather than transform? These thoughts troubled me, but I didn't have time to dwell on them. I felt myself being pulled upward again, stronger this time. I rose through the ceiling, through the roof, and suddenly I was outside, hovering above the church. The night sky stretched endlessly above me, stars gleaming with an intensity I had never noticed before. The city lights spread out below like a glittering carpet, and I could see cars moving along distant highways, carrying people who had no idea that a man had just died in the church office. I thought of Natalie again, asleep in our bed, unaware that she was now a widow. Would she be angry that I had stayed late at the church again? Would she blame my dedication to ministry for my death? These questions pierced me with regret, but I wasn't given long to contemplate these things. The upward pull intensified, and I found myself rising higher, the city growing smaller beneath me. I expected to feel fear of height, fear of falling, fear of the unknown, but there was none. Just a sense that I was journeying towards something inevitable. Then everything changed. The peaceful ascent suddenly halted, and I felt a new sensation, like being caught in a powerful current. The stars above began to fade, and the city lights below disappeared. Darkness surrounded me, not the darkness of night, but something deeper, heavier, almost tangible. The peace I had felt was replaced by the first stirrings of unease. Something was wrong. This wasn't right. This wasn't what I had expected death to be. God, I called out, my voice sounding strange and distant in this new realm. Lord, where are you? There was no answer, only a deepening of the darkness and a growing sense of dread that settled over me like a shroud. I was moving again, but not upward, downward, rapidly, falling. This was not the way to heaven. The darkness enveloped me completely as I plummeted downward. Unlike my earlier sensation of floating gently upward, this descent was violent and uncontrolled. I tumbled through the void, unable to orient myself or slow my fall. The temperature around me began to rise, not the comforting warmth of a summer day, but an oppressive, suffocating heat that seemed to press in from all sides. This can't be happening, I thought desperately. I've devoted my life to God. I've preached His word. I've led people to Christ. Even as these thoughts raced through my mind, I knew they were hollow justifications. Throughout my years of ministry, I had preached about salvation through faith, not works. Yet here I was, mentally cataloging my good deeds, as if they were currency that could buy my way into heaven. The hypocrisy of it struck me hard. As I continued to fall, memories from my life began to flash before me. Not the gentle reminiscence often described in near-death accounts, but a brutal, unvarnished review of my failures and shortcomings. I saw myself as a young man, more concerned with building a reputation than building God's kingdom. I remembered counseling sessions where I had checked my watch repeatedly, my mind already on my next appointment. I relived moments of pride when I had subtly steered conversations toward my accomplishments. I saw the genuine needs I had ignored because they came from people who couldn't elevate my status or contribute to the church financially. Worst of all, I saw my family. The disappointment in my children's eyes when I missed another dinner, another recital, another milestone. I saw Natalie's gradual withdrawal as she realized that she would always come second to my ministry. I had justified it all in the name of serving God, but now I could see the truth. Much of what I called ministry had been about serving Emmanuel Blackwood. "No, Lord," I cried out into the darkness. "Please, give me another chance. I'll do better. I'll be better." But my pleas seemed to dissipate into the void, unheard and unanswered. The heat continued to intensify, and now I detected a smell, sulfurous and acrid, burning my nostrils. The silence that had surrounded me began to give way to sounds, distant at first, then growing closer. Moans, wails, and screams mingled together in a terrible symphony of agony. Fear gripped me completely now. This was hell, not the metaphorical hell that modern theology often presents, not a simple separation from God, but a real place of torment. In that moment, all of my seminary training, all of my clever sermons about the symbolic nature of hell, crumbled in the face of this terrible reality. The fall suddenly ended as I landed hard on what felt like solid ground. The impact should have been devastating from such a height, but while I felt the collision, there was no breaking of bones, no physical damage. I realized, with growing horror, that my soul, or whatever form I now possessed, couldn't be destroyed by physical trauma. There would be no release through annihilation. I remained still for several moments, afraid to move, afraid to open my eyes and confirm what I already knew in my heart. But eventually, I forced myself to look. What I saw defied description, yet I must try to convey it, for this is the message I've been charged to deliver. The landscape around me was barren and desolate, a wasteland of jagged rocks and scorched earth stretching as far as I could see. The sky, if it could be called that, was a roiling mass of darkness, occasionally split by flashes of what looked like lightning, but without the accompanying thunder. These flashes illuminated my surroundings in brief, terrifying glimpses. The heat was unbearable, yet I couldn't sweat. My throat burned with thirst, but there was no moisture to be found. The air itself seemed thick with despair, making each breath, though I didn't need to breathe in this form, an effort of will. But the physical discomfort paled in comparison to the spiritual anguish. I felt completely abandoned, utterly forsaken. The presence of God, which I had claimed to feel so often in my ministry, was conspicuously absent. In its place was a void so profound, so complete, that it crushed my spirit more thoroughly than any physical weight could crush my body. This, I understood with terrible clarity, was the true nature of hell. Not just the physical torments, but the absolute absence of God's presence. In life, even those who reject God still benefit from His common grace. The beauty of a sunset, the love of family, the pleasure of food and drink, the majesty of music. But here, all of that was stripped away, leaving nothing but raw existence without hope, without beauty, without love. I stood on shaking legs, trying to make sense of my surroundings. In the distance, I could see moving shapes, figures that seemed human, but somehow distorted. Their movements were erratic, desperate. Some wandered aimlessly, while others clawed at the ground or at themselves as if trying to escape their own existence. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding weak and muffled in the dense air. "Can anyone hear me?" My words seemed to attract attention. Several of the distant figures stopped their movements and turned in my direction. Even from a distance, I could sense their hostility, their predatory interest. They began to move toward me with a terrible purpose. Fear propelled me into motion. I ran, stumbling over the uneven terrain, not knowing where I was going, but desperate to escape whatever was pursuing me. The ground burned my feet, and sharp rocks cut into my flesh, but the wounds didn't bleed. They just added to the symphony of pain that was becoming my existence. As I ran, I became aware of voices, whispers that seemed to come from the very air around me. "You deserve this," they hissed. "You're a hypocrite, a false shepherd. You led others astray with your lukewarm faith and your empty words." "No," I gasped, still running. "I believed. I truly believed." "Did you?" the voices mocked. "Or did you just enjoy the position, the respect, the authority? How many times did you open the Bible for a sermon without first opening your heart in prayer? How many times did you counsel others while hiding your own sins?" Each accusation struck like a physical blow, because I knew they contained truth. I had been a believer, yes, but my faith had become professional rather than personal, intellectual rather than transformative. I had known the right words, the right doctrines, but somewhere along the way, I had lost the living relationship that should have been at the center of it all. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, collapsing to my knees on the scorched ground. The pursuing figures were closer now, and in the occasional flashes of lightning, I could see their faces, twisted with malice and hunger. Some of them looked vaguely familiar, as if I had known them in life, but their features were distorted by hatred and despair. "Please, God," I prayed, covering my face with my hands. "If you can hear me in this place, please help me. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry for every time I used your name without honoring your presence, for every sermon I preached without living its truth, for every soul I failed because I was too busy building my own kingdom." The approaching figures were almost upon me now. I could hear their labored breathing, smell the corruption that seemed to emanate from them. I braced myself for whatever horror was about to unfold. But then, in the moment of my greatest despair, something unexpected happened. A pinpoint of light appeared in the darkness above me, tiny at first, no larger than a distant star, but growing steadily brighter. The approaching figures halted their advance, shrinking back from the light with hisses of rage and fear. The light continued to expand, pushing back the darkness, creating a small circle of illumination around me. In its glow, I felt a faint echo of the peace I had experienced briefly after leaving my body. It wasn't the full presence of God, but it was a reminder that even in this place of abandonment, He could still reach if He chose to. Emmanuel. A voice spoke my name, not audibly, but directly into my mind. It was gentle, yet authoritative, filled with both sadness and love. Lord? I whispered, hardly daring to hope. Not yet, the voice replied. Your time has not come. You have more to do. Please, don't leave me here, I begged, watching as the hostile figures circled just beyond the boundary of light, waiting for their chance to close in. I can't bear it. This is not your place, the voice assured me. But you needed to see it. You needed to understand what awaits those who hear the word but do not truly receive it. You needed to feel the reality that so many are heading toward, while you and others like you speak comfortable words from comfortable pulpits. The rebuke stung, but I recognized its truth. How often had I softened my message to avoid offending influential church members? How many times had I preached about God's love while barely mentioning the reality of judgment? I had created a gospel of comfort that demanded little and promised much, a false gospel that could save no one. If you return, the voice continued, you must tell them what you have seen. You must warn them about this place and the ease with which even those who call themselves believers can find their way here. The path to destruction is broad, and many who think they are on the narrow road have been deceived. I will, I promised fervently. I'll tell everyone. I won't hold anything back. Know this, the voice said, with a gravity that shook me to my core. If you return to your old ways, if you choose comfort over truth, status over service, your own glory over mine, your final destination will be this place, and it will be worse for you than for those who never knew my name. The weight of this warning pressed down on me. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a sacred commission, a terrible responsibility. I was being sent back as a witness to truths that many, including myself, had chosen to ignore or soften. I understand, I said, though I wasn't sure I fully did. How could anyone truly understand the stakes until they had seen this place? The circle of light around me began to expand further, pushing back the darkness and the figures that lurked within it. The heat and oppression that had been crushing me started to recede, replaced by a cooling sensation like a gentle breeze. Remember everything you have seen here, the voice instructed, as the light grew blindingly bright. Remember and tell them. The brightness intensified until it consumed everything. The desolate landscape, the menacing figures, even my own form. I felt myself being drawn upward once again, but this time the sensation was deliberate and controlled. A guided ascension rather than a terrifying fall. As I rose, the screams and moans of the damned faded, replaced gradually by a profound silence. The sulfurous smell dissipated, giving way to a freshness that reminded me of early mornings in spring, when the world seems new and full of possibility. I was leaving hell behind, but I knew I would carry its reality with me forever. What I had seen couldn't be unlearned or forgotten. The comforting theological constructs I had built over years of ministry had been shattered by the undeniable truth of what awaited those who rejected God's salvation, whether through open defiance or the more subtle rejection of lukewarm faith. But where was I going now? Back to my body or somewhere else first? The light surrounding me shifted, changing from a simple brightness to something more complex and beautiful, a luminescence that seemed alive with purpose and joy. I was moving upward still, but now I felt as if I was being drawn towards something rather than just away from the horrors below. I was about to experience another reality, one as glorious as hell had been terrible. And this, too, would become part of the message I was being charged to deliver. The transition was gradual, yet absolute. The oppressive darkness of hell gave way to a light so pure, so perfect, that it should have been blinding, yet I could perceive it clearly. This wasn't just illumination. It was as if light itself had been refined and purified into its truest form. Colors that I had no names for moved through this radiance like living things. Colors beyond the spectrum, visible to human eyes, yet somehow familiar, as if my soul had always known them, even though my earthly senses could not perceive them. As I continued to ascend through this realm of light, I became aware of sounds, not the tormented screams of hell, but harmonies so beautiful that they made every symphony I had ever heard seem like discordant noise in comparison. The music had no discernible source. It simply existed as an inherent property of this place, as fundamental as the light itself. It resonated not just around me, but through me, each note washing away more of the horror and despair that had clung to me from my time in hell. Then I felt a presence, vast and intimate simultaneously. It surrounded me completely, yet touched me with the gentleness of a father's hand on a child's head. I knew, with a certainty beyond anything I had experienced in my life, that I was in the presence of God Himself, not just aware of Him intellectually, as I had been during my years of ministry, but truly, fully in His presence. What happened next is almost impossible to convey in human language. The barriers that had always existed between my consciousness and God's truth, barriers of sin, of pride, of limited understanding, momentarily dissolved. For a brief, eternal moment, I saw everything as He sees it. I understood His love, His justice, His holiness not as theological concepts, but as living realities more substantial than mountains, more fundamental than time itself. I saw my own life, every moment of genuine faith, alongside every compromise, every sincere prayer, alongside every empty religious performance. I saw how God had been working even through my flawed ministry, touching lives despite my shortcomings. But I also saw how much more effective I could have been had I truly surrendered everything to Him, instead of maintaining careful control of my life and career. Most devastatingly, I saw how many opportunities I had missed. People who had come to me seeking God, but had found only religion. Souls who had drifted away because I was too busy with church programs to notice their pain. Family moments sacrificed on the altar of ecclesiastical success. The regret was overwhelming, yet it came without condemnation. Instead, each revelation of failure was accompanied by an understanding of how things could be different if I returned. Lord, I managed to communicate, though I wasn't speaking with a physical voice. I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve a second chance. The response came not in words, but in an impression of such profound love and grace that it broke something within me. The last vestiges of the self-righteous, self-sufficient persona I had cultivated for so many years. In its place flowed a humility born not of self-hatred, but of clear-eyed recognition of both my complete dependence on God's mercy and my immeasurable value in His sight. Then, something new entered my awareness, a vision of what seemed to be an endless city gleaming with that same transcendent light. I could see structures that resembled buildings, yet they were unlike any architecture on Earth, organic and geometric simultaneously, perfectly integrated with what appeared to be landscapes of astonishing beauty. Rivers that shimmered like liquid crystal flowed through gardens of impossible perfection. Trees bearing fruits I couldn't identify stretched toward a sky filled with that living light. And there were people, countless people moving through this heavenly landscape. Though they were distant, I could somehow perceive their joy, their peace, their wholeness. These were the redeemed, those who had found the narrow path and followed it to its glorious destination. I longed to join them, to step fully into this reality that made even the best moments of earthly existence seem like pale shadows. As if in response to this longing, I felt myself being drawn closer to the celestial city. Details became clearer, and I began to make out individual faces among the multitudes. Some seemed vaguely familiar, as if I might have known them during my life, though I couldn't place specific names or relationships. Just as I thought I might be permitted to enter this paradise, everything stopped. The forward motion ceased, and I felt myself suspended between worlds, no longer in the depths of hell, yet not fully admitted to heaven. A gentle but firm boundary held me in place. "Not yet, Emmanuel," came the impression. "This is not your time. You have been shown these things so that you may testify to what awaits both those who reject me and those who truly embrace me. But your work on earth is not finished." A profound disappointment washed over me. Having glimpsed even the outskirts of heaven, how could I bear to return to the limitations and struggles of earthly existence? Yet mixed with this disappointment was a growing sense of purpose. If I could help even one soul avoid the horrors of hell and find their way to this glorious reality, wouldn't any temporary discomfort be worthwhile? "What would you have me do, Lord?" I asked, surrendering fully for perhaps the first time in my life. The answer came with crystal clarity, not a detailed plan, but a fundamental reorientation. "Love me with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Everything else flows from this. You have known these commandments intellectually. Now, you must live them with every breath." It seemed so simple, yet I knew it would require a complete transformation of my priorities, my ministry, my entire approach to life. The Emmanuel Blackwood who returned would need to be a different man from the one who had died on that office floor. I felt myself beginning to move again, but not toward the celestial city. I was being drawn backward, away from the perfection I had glimpsed. The heavenly music began to fade, the transcendent colors to dim. A deep sense of loss welled up within me. "Please," I pleaded, "just a little longer." But the withdrawal continued, gentle yet inexorable. The boundary between worlds was reasserting itself, and I was being guided back toward the physical realm I had left behind. As heaven receded from my awareness, I received one final impression. Not a commandment this time, but a promise. "This is not goodbye, Emmanuel. This is what awaits you if you remain faithful to the end. Let this hope sustain you through whatever trials may come." With that promise echoing through my consciousness, the glorious vision disappeared completely. The sensation of movement changed. becoming less like a guided journey and more like a rapid descent. I was falling again, but not into darkness this time. I was falling back toward life, back toward my body, back toward a world that would seem unbearably dull and limited after what I had experienced. Yet I was also falling back toward purpose, a clearer, purer purpose than I had ever known. I had been to the heights of heaven and the depths of hell. I had seen the ultimate consequences of both genuine faith and empty religion. And I had been charged with sharing this revelation with the world that was largely blind to these spiritual realities. As the boundary between worlds grew thinner, I braced myself for the shock of re-entering my physical body. I knew it would be painful, both physically as I returned to a heart damaged by cardiac arrest, and spiritually as I exchanged direct communion with God for the faith walk of earthly existence. But I was ready. More than ready. I was returning with a mission. The shock of re-entry was violent and disorienting. One moment, I was suspended in that liminal space between worlds, still bathed in the fading glow of heaven. The next, I was slammed back into cold, unyielding flesh. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Not the spiritual anguish of hell, but the physical agony of a body that had begun to die. My chest felt as if it had been crushed by an enormous weight. Every nerve ending screamed in protest as blood began to circulate again through tissues starved of oxygen. My lungs burned as they expanded, drawing in a desperate, ragged breath that sounded obscenely loud in the quiet office. My eyes flew open, but the world around me was a blur of shapes and shadows. After the vivid clarity of the spiritual realms, my physical senses seemed painfully limited, like trying to view an IMAX film through a keyhole. Colors were flat, sounds muffled, smells faint and indistinct. I became aware of voices, distant at first, but growing clearer. The church hallways looked strangely unfamiliar as we passed through them. The same buildings I had walked countless times, yet somehow alien. It was as if I was seeing them through new eyes, and in a way, I was. Everything. The wooden cross on the wall, the bulletin board covered with ministry announcements, the framed mission statement in the lobby. All of it seemed simultaneously more trivial and more consequential than before. The doctors called my recovery miraculous, but they had no idea of the true miracle that had occurred. For weeks after returning to my body, I struggled to readjust to physical existence. Colors seemed dull, food tasteless, and human conversation painfully limited after experiencing direct communion with the divine. But gradually, I began to understand that these limitations were part of the test. Could I maintain my connection to eternal truths while living within temporal constraints? Could I convey what I had witnessed in a way that would penetrate hearts hardened by comfort and complacency? My ministry transformed completely. Gone were the safe sermons and politically calculated church growth strategies. I spoke plainly about the reality of hell, not as a theological abstraction, but as a destination many were racing toward while believing themselves secure. I testified to heaven's glory, not as a vague reward, but as our true home, worth any earthly sacrifice to attain. Some church members left, uncomfortable with my new intensity and unwavering focus on eternal consequences. But others were awakened, their lukewarm faith ignited into passionate commitment as they recognized the stakes involved in their spiritual choices. 15 years have passed since that night when my heart stopped beating. My body still bears the scars of death, a weakened heart that requires medication, occasional tremors in my left hand, fatigue that comes without warning. But these physical limitations are constant reminders of the message I've been charged to deliver. I no longer fear death. I've seen what lies beyond. Instead, I fear failing in my commission to awaken others before their time runs out. This testimony isn't meant to frighten you, though righteous fear has its place, but to remind you that eternity is real, judgment is certain, and the choice between heaven and hell is made not just in dramatic moments of conversion, but in the quiet, daily decisions.